This is a big video with a ton of our policies that will be sustaining long term, so it lays out how we operate to give you some more transparency and visibility into the processes as we follow them for reports and reviews. That includes publishing all of this on our gamers.nexus website in writing. Given the topics over the past week, we've seen some misinformation and some speculation as it relates to the way we report on companies, who we report on, and the decisions that we make during that process. So we thought this was a good opportunity to compile and fully publish our ethical beliefs and positions, our policies on contacting companies ahead of stories or not, and write onto the ethics statements website that we have a lot of the things that we've said over the years or followed internally, but all in one place. You all like our deep dive content, and well, in this one, we're basically publishing a deep dive compendium of our beliefs and processes. If it were D&D, it'd be enough to be a full standalone module compendium. And I'm kind of oddly excited for this video because even though it's a topic like policies, it serves to just stand as a long-term detailer for how we operate. This video will make transparent our long-standing policies on the following topics, and we have some cool updates. We'll be talking about contact versus no contact policies and beliefs for companies we're covering. For example, we didn't contact Newegg or Principled Technologies prior to our initial investigative pieces we did on the companies, nor did we contact The Verge or NZXT for some of our content. Our new website we built this week actually has a whole page of case studies for some examples and our reasoning defined publicly in case you're ever curious, and we'll come back to that. This video will also provide our coverage stance on press, media outlets, article-driven reviewers, content creators, and video-driven reviewers as it pertains to our coverage scope and spectrum. Also, our stance and beliefs on co-branded products and conflicts of interest. In addition to our approach to errors, corrections, and data that's new. Updates and new icons added to our video user interface indicating whether we bought the product under review, received it for review from the manufacturer, or have it on loan, like from a viewer. We thought this would be cool because we want a visual immediate indicator when the video starts, and it'll be a nice feature to help viewers understand where something came from. Also, last week, we published a banned list on our Advertisers page. We'll start with our policies on when we choose to contact versus not contact a company. We have a list of case studies as well that we'll be going through, again featuring the likes of Newegg, Artesian Builds, and plenty more. First, we need to define what the terminology means. We define contact, or sometimes referred to as reaching out, as the non-public request for comment, statement, or background information from the primary subject of the content piece pertaining to a developing story that GN is covering or thinking of covering prior to a public criticism or expose from GN, thus alerting them to the story. The initial outreach is non-public. That means it's not a video or a tweet exposing them. So that's our definition of contact for purposes of this policy, and although we've operated by these guidelines for many years now and these beliefs, as you'll see in the case studies section, we wanted to formalize them in public writing to grant you all some insight to how we operate, and it also serves as a really useful internal roadmap, like for my team to follow as they continue to iterate on what I've been doing. These are the only policies we'll be following, and if you ever want to learn about them, you can go to that site, and if we ever change or update them, we will notify you all of that update. These policies apply to all categories of all entities we may cover equally. That includes manufacturers, retailers, factories, suppliers, social media and ad agencies, press, media, and content creators with a wide influence and reach operating within the coverage categories related to the story. So now we get into some of the stronger beliefs we have. This is out of fairness to all entities we cover. We don't believe in building a buddy-buddy relationship with companies in the industry, as that allows corruption to seep in. Now we get into the criteria of contact. Given that the nature of publishing a critical content piece and considering that every subject, video, and investigation has circumstances that are completely different, our decision to contact versus not contact is situational per the incident. If any one of the criteria is met, we may choose to not contact, to forego contacting the company in advance to ensure that the truth of the situation is brought to light and that our viewers are provided with the unfiltered evidence that we've uncovered and our thoughts on it. The full criteria list for not reaching out is on the screen. We'll explain a couple of these and read some examples, but if you want the full list, you'll have to head over to gamers.nexus. You can click on ethics statements. Here's the criteria: motive and opportunity to cover up, mislead, or misrepresent, subject comment available, responses to existing content, history of failure to resolve issues, bad faith or unprofessionalism, provable and or objective fault, immediate and or time-sensitive risk to the consumer, potential for witness or source intimidation, for example by the employer, possibility of legal interventions, public record or already public information, and risk of physical danger. And so these apply to everyone. And let's get into some of the definitions and examples of the most important ones. The first is motive and opportunity. In some cases, reaching out provides a clear opportunity for a subject to fix the issues that we are seeking to expose in an attempt to make the story go away, rather than truly resolving the root cause of those issues. This can include backpedaling of singular instances of problems that are indicative of a wider spread issue. And we'll talk about Newegg pretty specifically for this whole subject in the case studies section. It also includes hiding evidence, releasing a misleading public statement first to get ahead of the story or the controversy, or any other method of twisting the facts to the entity's benefit. To meet this criteria, we feel that there must be both motive, or a reason or a benefit to take such an action, and the opportunity. Here's an example of the criteria being met. It's made up. A prominent software company is rumored to have a critical security vulnerability in their widely used application, potentially compromising millions of users' data. Our anonymous source has informed us that the company refused to take action within a disclosure period. Our investigations have unearthed internal communications within the company that suggest they were aware of the vulnerability months before it came to public attention, but actively chose not to act on it. If we were to contact them about our findings before publishing, they would have both the motive and the opportunity to quickly patch the flaw, destroy or hide internal communications that suggest intentional inaction, and then release a public statement claiming they just discovered and swiftly addressed the vulnerability. By doing so, the software company would quickly craft the appearance of proactiveness and responsible behavior, thus sidelining the actual core of the issue, which would have been, in this scenario, their intentional, negligent inaction despite being aware of the security vulnerability and the threat. This would not only hinder the impact of our expose, but would also fail to hold them accountable for their earlier negligence, which may be affecting other products and is far more important in terms of understanding the company and where else it might have such problems than the singular instance. We have another example on the page as well if you'd like more, and on that page you can also find examples of the criteria not being met, in other words, where we would contact them. Next criteria is subject comment available. We may choose not to contact if there exists a statement, a comment, or discussion on the matter from the subject, either publicly or privately, if we're able to locate their internal communications and messages which can serve as their stance or viewpoint on the issue. In this instance, the original comment is sufficient, and asking for a new comment under the looming threat of a content piece provides the motive and the opportunity, as outlined previously, for the subject to change their statement for better public perception. Here's an example. Consumers are upset at a display manufacturer's actions, and the company dismisses the seriousness of these concerns or denies them on Twitter or via leaked or obtained internal email exchanges. In this situation, the criteria is met, and we may choose not to contact the company. Next is responses to existing content, where content can be made by manufacturers, press, media, factories, anything like that. History or failure to resolve issues is fairly straightforward. We may not contact an entity if it has documented a history of neglecting to address certain problems, if it shows insincerity, unprofessionalism, or acts in bad faith or maliciously when confronted with criticisms or evidence of wrongdoing. In an example here, let's say a major electronics brand has been previously caught using subpar materials in its headphones, and these lead to rapid wear and tear, particularly early in the product's life. When contacted or approached for comment on the matter previously, they not only denied the allegations, but also launched a targeted PR campaign to discredit the media outlet. And this is without addressing or rectifying the issue. Now, we go to today, and the same brand is under scrutiny for misleading battery life claims in its new line of wireless earbuds. In this instance, the criteria is met, and we may not contact the company. The next one is potential for witness or source intimidation. We've actually had this one come up a lot. So this mostly pertains to sources being at risk of retaliation within the company, for example, losing a job, if not something more serious like legal ramifications, For example, if a witness or a source provides us with internal proof of their employer's wrongdoing, you could go as extreme as dumping waste into a river or something. And if there's possibility that contact could result in a witness or source being found, intimidated, maybe threatened or silenced or gagged somehow under an order, then it's best to avoid contact with the company or the entity. There's more of these. The rest of them are on the website for you if you want to check it out, like immediate risk to consumer or provable and objective fault. Now we get to the important and kind of fun section, because we get to look at old content and provide some historical examples of when we've applied these long-standing policies. And for me, it was a lot of fun to look back at. So these case studies are broken up into 3 categories. There's no contact, there's contact, and there's mix. And mix is interesting because it can involve a few scenarios. For example, if we contact one entity, but not another, if there are 2 subjects to a story. Another might be if we contact the subject about something within the story, but not all of it. Artesian is a great example of this. The first case study is from our Newegg series. We ran 4 entries to this one, and this was about the time that we bought a motherboard from Newegg as consumers, and then we returned it unopened. We were denied the return despite having not opened it, and we were lied to about why it was denied by customer service. And remember, we were customers during the entire period for this. So in the first video, titled Newegg Scammed Us, we did not contact Newegg for comment or tell them that we were working on the story non-publicly. The only time we contacted Newegg was to speak with its customer service agents as a customer. That created the story to begin with. That is not contact. It's acting as a customer, basically a secret shopper type of thing. Although embarrassingly for Newegg, we weren't trying to be secret, they were just that bad. But they denied us a return that should have been permitted, and we then began investigating this. We publicly exposed Newegg's actions on Twitter without notice while we worked on the story. The Consumer Report was the story, and we didn't contact Newegg out of public eye or inform them of what we were working on or seek their comment. Newegg actually replied to our public tweet, and when I went and looked back at what we said, we were very publicly firm about our choices to not contact them. It's on the screen. We told them we can talk after the video because their actions were disingenuous and showing favoritism towards a reviewer over a customer, and our point was to review the customer experience. So, no contact. The criteria met for this decision include these: motive and opportunity to cover up, mislead, or misrepresent the story, history of failure to resolve issues, obviously, and provable and or objective fault. They already made their choice, in our opinions, when we were a customer, and we weren't going to allow them to twist the story now that they knew we were someone they cared about. Finally, our other entry on the site for Newegg is confronting Newegg face-to-face. This one is under contact. We found that this situation did not meet our criteria, and so we contacted them. We chose to initiate contact for the following reasons. First, Newegg was given notice as the issue was already public and it was already fully investigated by our team, including 2 initial entries, and all that remained was to get public comments and a resolution from Newegg. In other words, we wanted them to commit on camera to what they were going to do about this and how they were going to improve after we already exposed them for their deeper corporate bad practices. The other reason was previous attempts to mislead us as consumers were already publicly exposed by our content, and that was done in the first 2 rounds of investigation. As such, this ensured no further opportunity for Newegg to cover up because it was already out there. Next study is for The Verge. In the video titled The Verge Abusing Copyright Claim System to Hide PC Build Video, it's a literal title if I've ever written one, we covered instances where The Verge was copyright claiming and striking people who criticized or parodied its dangerously inaccurate tutorial or guide for building a PC. We did not contact the publication prior to publishing. Criteria met for that included possibility of legal interventions, motive and opportunity to cover up, mislead, or misrepresent, history of failure to resolve issues, public record or already public information, and response to existing content. The Verge had issued numerous statements dragging critics of their PC building how-to video. These statements included things as extreme as legal action, like copyright strikes, and misleading or misdirecting commentary. They, as such, did not get contact from us prior to us taking it to task for its abuse of the YouTube copyright strike system. Next study is for Intel. This video was Intel's 28 cores of bullshit, Intel's 5 GHz parlor trick. We did not contact Intel. This story involved the time that Intel presented a 28-core CPU as 5 GHz while operating a chiller under a table at its announcement event. Criteria met for not reaching out to Intel include already public information, provable or objective fault. We had video evidence and text message screenshots of the chiller under the table and the setup for it, and also response to existing content. Intel contacted us after that video went live, but we did not contact them before. Next study is NZXT. In the video, NZXT bait and switch PCIe riser replacement, we did not seek comment, although we saw NZXT's comment and contacted them on the initial issues. You can read that on the website in the contact column. We did not contact them for this one. Criteria met for not contacting include history of failure to resolve issues, bad faith or unprofessionalism, and provable fault. In the video titled "The Problem with Linus Tech Tips Accuracy, Ethics, and Responsibility," we did not contact the organization. The criteria met for no contact include response to existing content, subject comment available, prior public comment, provable objective fault, already public information, motive and opportunity to mislead, especially based on prior public comments about the issue, history of failure to resolve issues or unprofessionalism in prior communications. We previously had non-public contact with the organization about similar matters that were not resolved satisfactorily or wherein we sometimes were the recipient of aggressive messaging pertaining to reviewed topics. The next case study is on principled technology. This old PT report is interesting because for this story we have two entries. One is under mix and one is under no contact. The first entry to the story was Intel's gross incompetence and principled technologies, Intel response. This story involved two subjects, Intel and Principled Technologies, a marketing/testing firm. Principled Technologies had produced enormously wrong benchmarks that painted AMD in an unbelievably bad light. They turned off half of the cores in their testing alongside many other problems like using a much worse CPU cooler for AMD. And they were being paid by Intel to do this testing. Intel then bragged about those numbers publicly and ahead of the review by something like a week so that reviewers couldn't get out in front of those numbers to refute them, which also put Intel in a very bad light. We actually did not contact either, had the entire video rendered and ready to go, and then the story blew up separate from us from large public controversy on Reddit, where Redditors and media were lambasting Intel for these practices. Intel realized quickly that media outlets were working on covering the topic, and it actively began calling other outlets, including us. Intel's statement was then shoved into the beginning of the finished video after this. However, we did not contact Principled Technologies, and the criteria met for them were motive and opportunity to mislead, response to existing content, provable and objective fault, and already public information, called out on social media and other publications first. Entry 2 of this series was exclusive interview with Principled Technologies on Intel testing. We showed up at Principled Technologies unannounced and did not contact them in advance. Criteria met for no contact were immediate time-sensitive risk to the consumer, because again, we were under embargo and couldn't publish the real data, and provable and/or objective fault. Now, technically, they may have had about 5 to 10 minutes of notice before we showed up, because we announced it in the first video that we published while we were driving over to their headquarters. So if they saw that video, then they may have had a few minutes notice. Although they were able to go on camera and represent their viewpoints, it was effectively at no notice and an expose without contact. They had no time to craft a statement. We did not contact before the content, and that's because they were the content in this interview. The next study is Tom's Hardware. In the video titled "Response to Tom's Hardware's Insane Just Buy It" post, we did not contact Tom's. The criteria met or subject comment available and response to existing content. Now we're moving to the mix section, which is pretty interesting because it's a combination of contact and no contact for the story. Contacting companies in advance of a story isn't black and white. Sometimes we don't tell them about aspects of the story, but we might seek comment on something that doesn't meet the other criteria. Here's some examples. One case study was Artesian Builds. This was a mix for our first installment in the Artesian Build series. We contacted Artesian for specific comments initially, as we had unsubstantiated allegations from people claiming to be former employees. They later turned out to actually be former employees. The claims related to solvency, so rumors of impending bankruptcy, alongside rumors of legal action or lawsuits, among other claims. As both bankruptcy and legal action will all become public record at some point, there is no opportunity for them to cover up the alleged existence of either. However, we did not inform the subject of all of our information, including more damning and evidence-backed information about misuse of company funds. You might remember we talked about when they bought a Triceratops skull. After a reply to our request took an inappropriate turn, we retracted our offer of an in-person meeting, and we focused instead on giving the soon-to-be former employees the spotlight that they deserved. In part 2, inside the collapse of Artesian Builds from 20 million to bankrupt, we also had a mix. For one single aspect of this investigation, we reached out to Artesian's lawyer because a former employee presenting to GN proof of non-payment by Artesian for work provided was told by Artesian's CEO to contact Artesian's attorney instead of just fixing it. So we did that on behalf of the employee, as the employee did not have the financial positioning or stability to engage in a legal battle. For the vast majority of the investigation, though, we did not contact Artesian Builds, we did not seek comment, nor did we inform them of the story or what would be in it. The criteria met for this include a history of failure to resolve issues, bad faith or unprofessionalism, immediate time-sensitive risk to the consumer, their customers, possibility of legal interventions, motive and opportunity to cover up, mislead, or misrepresent. That's the one where we entered the old warehouse unannounced with the broker to investigate hearsay or claims from former employees of abandoned materials, customer systems, and unfulfilled and unrefunded orders. GN became aware of the subject, allegedly telling people that it would sue Gamers Nexus, something we talked about before, in an attempt to stop the story, and that fulfilled our possibility of legal interventions criteria to avoid contact. The next case study for Mix was the Kill Shot, MSI's review practices and ethics video. This was pertaining to a story that MSI was stifling coverage from reviewer Tech Team GB. On July 23, 2020, we contacted MSI for a comment as some claims were hearsay without supporting information. Those claims were related to MSI stalling the media as a delay tactic to defer critical commentary. However, when MSI responded to our contact, it attempted to schedule the discussion on August 4th. That would have been 2 weeks after the content and the event would be relevant. And this was in conjunction with existing communications we had indicative of ethical concerns for MSI's handling of reviews. As this 2-week delay aligned with the prior hearsay of delays for slowing PR damage, we collected our necessary evidence and we no longer needed comment for these criteria: motive and opportunity to cover up, mislead, or misrepresent, and a history of failure to resolve issues, bad faith, or unprofessionalism. Now we get into a case study for contact. We'll keep this short, the rest of them are on the website. In the video, NDXT is irresponsible and dangerous, H1 fire hazard should be recalled. We were not first to the situation, nor did we initially discover the issues. That makes it kind of unique. It didn't meet our criteria for not contacting NZXT, and that's for a couple reasons. So we chose to initiate contact. The reasons were, one, it's already was active U.S. government knowledge due to filed Consumer Product Safety Commission reports, including documentation. 2, the matter was already public for quite some time before our arrival to the topic. And 3, there was no opportunity to cover up because of how well known it was and because the government had awareness of the issue. If we discovered the issue first and we were able to verify it like we've done with some others, then it may have been a situation where no contact was made. But this one did not meet that criteria. There's 15 years of Gamers Nexus history now on stories. It's a lot to remember. As you can see, though, we're pretty damn consistent in our standards we uphold when taking into account the full chronology of a story as it develops. We've now published these standards fully and transparently on the site, and that's alongside the criteria and historical case studies, so you're able to understand how and why we make the choices we've been making. Next, we're getting into why we view press, content creators, and media with a wide and significant influence as relevant and within our scope of coverage. So this stance applies equally to manufacturers and retailers in the space, as we've said earlier, but press, media, and creators are also technically competitors, depending on the vertical they're in. And we'll also be explaining our views on the potential both benefits and risks in reporting with this in mind. So first, our stance is on impartiality. This is pretty straightforward, but we report on a story based on the merits of the story, not based on affiliation or competition. Secondly, Covering competitors could have benefits, such as generating attention or generating revenue. Likewise, it could have very significant and inherent risks. Examples of those would notably include reputational concerns, retaliation in public or private, or just the isolation that stems from potential perceptions of bias or criticizing a content creator, especially with a loyal fan base. Although article authors tend to not have that same sort of parasocial, I don't know if you call it an advantage or a disadvantage, but situation. We have also noticed some development of sort of website reviewer versus YouTuber clicks or expectations with audience perception especially, and we don't agree with that. We find it unethical to expect different treatment only because the form of publishing is different, and we treat all media equally, whether they are old guard written media or newer sort of YouTube media in the space. And those are our firm beliefs on this, so that's how we're operating. So for us, it's very simple. It's all treated the same way. Now, our responsibility is to covering all relevant subjects, including those seen as competitors. And this is where we get into why does it fall into the scope of coverage. So choosing to omit such stories would be a disservice to our core mission of informing the audience. And here's our reasoning for it. Content creators, media, and press, like us, have the power to shape public perception just as powerfully, if not more so, compared to manufacturers and retailers. Media can influence purchasing decisions, it can influence brand perception, it can influence industry trends and discussion. And when these influences negatively, harmfully, or misleadingly, whether intentional or not, affect our viewers, for whom we endeavor to bring all of our findings, then it becomes our scope of coverage, our area of coverage. So our commitment is to our audience, not to manufacturers and not to our peers in the space. And by focusing on only manufacturers or only retailers, sort of the low-hanging fruit, we would be neglecting a significant sector of the industry that holds a critical influence over consumer choices. And ignoring misleading or erroneous information from these entities out of sort of a association would compromise our commitment. Now, this doesn't mean that we're going out hunting down mistakes in reviews for everyone, because as we've said before and recently, all of us in this industry make mistakes and have mistakes in our reviews. It's pretty regular. And what this is for us, it's about the handling of them. It's about the patterns. It's about recurring mistakes, especially of the same type that may have an impact on how the viewer or the consumer acts. And at some level, it's about intent as well, such as choosing to publish something that you may know as a reporter or an outlet or whatever the classification is, an influencer, to have errors in spite of knowing of them. So our guiding principle there is very simple. It's just we aim to serve the audience. So nothing here, just to be clear about this, is changing. We're not suddenly shifting our content to focus on press, media, and content creators. As you've seen, we have over the years covered a number of such instances, such as The Verge, Tom's Hardware. We had the Tech Power Up thing we covered quite a while ago. And then, of course, more recently, the Linus Media Group stuff. So we're not changing anything or increasing the frequency of those. We're just defining why we choose, when we do, to cover such events. Finally, to address the inherent conflict of reporting on outlets, which are technically competitors, it mostly boils down to something very simple, which is that the nature of a specialized field like computer hardware reviews is that anyone who would be capable of and equipped for detecting significant errors that are worthy of reporting on in this kind of content is likely to be a competitor or a manufacturer anyway. It's not a very wide-reaching field. It often requires, if not special equipment, at least just a lot of hardware of a certain type. And so naturally, the people who are best equipped to talk about the data of others are going to be their competitors or, once again, manufacturers. So technical hardware reviewers are uniquely positioned here to detect the nuanced misrepresentations, errors, or whatever it may be that can affect consumers. The next section is our stance and beliefs on co-branded products. So we define co-branded products as an initiative wherein a manufacturer whose products the outlet reviews partners with the outlet to produce some kind of product bearing the work and the name, potentially, of both companies. So this topic came up recently because a manufacturer emailed us asking why we hold such strong beliefs and such a strong stance against collaborating with PC hardware companies on making something with us, and with GN's name or with GN's input, whatever it is. And for background, we've thought about this topic a lot publicly. So at one point in 2020, we were approached by numerous computer hardware case manufacturers, one in particular though, seeking a deal wherein we would assist them in designing and testing a case. In 2021, we made a video explaining why we decided not to go forward with that. I was really excited about the concept of it. You can see that in the 2020 video. And we sort of had an open discussion with the audience. We said, here's the thing, here's the opportunity. What do you all think? And actually, most people in our audience were very in favor of it, but something about it just kept bugging me. And so that's why we said in 2021, hey, we're not going to go forward with it. And we explained a little bit why. At this point, speaking candidly, we have passed up millions of dollars worth of opportunities in these co-branding efforts. It is not insignificant. And I think it's worth explaining why that is. This is something I feel very strongly about. I know some manufacturers disagree with our stance on this, but it doesn't really matter because it's our belief. So they can have a different one, that's fine. Now in our view, it doesn't matter if the co-branded part is not a category we review. Let's say, is this company even still around? Let's say Tunique, I don't think they are, approached us. And even though they're a cooler company, they want us to manufacture a mouse pad with them. Now, we don't review mouse pads, but we would still reject that deal because at the core of it, we might review their other products. We won't go into full depth here. You can see the website for the detailed viewpoints we have as to why we hold this position, but we view it as a larger conflict of interest than advertising, which is already obviously a potential conflict, but one which we've detailed heavily already. Our stance on this is it's okay and expected for a manufacturer to seek these deals, co-branded deals. That's kind of their job, is to get exposure and try to sell things. But it's the media outlet, we think, that holds the responsibility to filter them out depending on the positioning of that outlet and what it's trying to do. And for us, it means filtering them out. For a few brief reasons of why we hold these views, first, it's a matter of tangibility. Co-branded products introduce tangible assets, like inventory, where both the media outlet and the manufacturer have vested interests. If a product with the media's branding underperforms or isn't well received, it could impact the reputation and the finances, especially of the media outlet, creating a potential for bias. For co-branded products that have a physicality, if they don't sell, then you now have the additional issue of the product sitting physically on a warehouse shelf, potentially taking up space, which costs money on a regular basis, rent or mortgage or otherwise. Now with advertising, it's more transient, it's intangible. It doesn't produce physical goods with a need to be sold, and thus it doesn't create the same lasting entanglement between the entities. Likewise, it is one way. We can also easily and immediately eliminate an entire campaign or replace it with another with basically no notice if our stance on a brand changes overnight. So if suddenly we discover something terrible about the way they're handling their RMA processes or whatever, it's easy. It's like that and it's done. Whereas with co-branded products, let's say you have $150,000 worth of inventory getting manufactured between both companies. One, there may be contracts that prohibit that severing that are much harder to get out of than, say, an ad deal. And two, you're just more financially entangled. It's going to be a way harder decision to make. But from my point of view, it's very simple in that I don't want to even have to think about it. I don't want to have to justify the action later. I don't want to have to try and navigate the complications of having my own potentially warehouse storage tied up with the product of a company that suddenly overnight we discover is doing terrible things or whatever. It's just easier for us to not have to deal with it. And so that's why we block such opportunities, and it's a belief that we hold at GN. We have our other stances and beliefs relating to this published on the website. Up next, in addition to how we're doing errors and corrections. So a few months ago, we added the formally published errors and corrections section on the .nexus website, and this hasn't changed. We're not going to be covering it again. We already talked about it, so if you've seen that, you're up to speed, except we added something earlier this week, which is that we will now be keeping a public log and a record of error corrections for errors that we rank as moderate or high, and we've got those moderate and high impact defined on the website already for a while now. I was actually inspired to do this months ago when I saw, I think it's an old Tom Scott video, the YouTuber Tom Scott, where he made an errors page, and that was where I originally decided to introduce the errors and corrections page as it stands now, but I wanted to add a log like Tom Scott also has, and so we started moving towards that. Now, this log will keep a rolling average for impact to our percent accuracy over the period of the rolling average. So we'll have a percent accuracy for videos against high impact and for videos against moderate impact. This rolling window is going to be 6 months about, and we're actively working on going through and collecting those numbers so we can populate the page. So it's not populated yet, but we want you to know that's something that we've already started the process of, and the details will be there shortly. As we take the time to compile this calculation, we wanted to set a public target for accuracy against both types of errors, and that target will be 95% for videos free of moderate or high impact errors, and we're gonna have a calculation for each one on that page. We could probably create like a line graph or something over time as we collect enough data. This is actually really cool, the target that is, because one, it makes it more tangible for us. It allows us to track over time, even if it's not favorable sometimes, how we're doing. And if we start to see it like slipping, then it's a very clear indicator of, hey, something's not working. Like something in the QC process isn't right. We got to fix it. And it's not just a feeling. It's hey, we have like data for our own errors, and we can make adjustments pursuant to it. This is also cool for my team because it gives the team a very clear, like, hey, here's our public goal for what we're shooting for, and we can all kind of work on that in the QC stages. So we've always had a fairly extensive QC pipeline. For those who don't know, basically the video, it goes through concepting and testing. It then gets into the script writing phase. It goes through a round of reviews. That's either going to be me or a technician on the team who's familiar somewhat with the subject from the writers. Different people, though, is the point. And then after that goes through the video editor. The video editors are fairly technical, so although it's not the core job, they are also often equipped to do some QC of the charts and things like that. After that, it goes through QC number 1, which is a technician. It goes through QC number 2, which is the writer, and or it goes through me. It depends where I fall in the pipeline for that project. And then we do a lead review and publish it. Now, the one thing we've changed here is we've added recently some additional fact-checking steps. This is kind of cool. We now are working with a writer who is not on the project to fact-check some basics of the writer who is on the project. This is something we've wanted to do for a while. I picked it up from sort of the way the newspaper world operates, and I've always liked it. And so the goal of the fact checker is not necessarily to check every single detail, like numbers that we've collected, but rather numbers and information that we haven't collected. So we added that recently. And then we also have a peer review process now for the acoustic testing, because that's new for us. We talked about that in the Fractal Terra review. Anyway, next is a small update. It's on banned advertisers. Update to our advertising policies page. Previously, we've already said that we banned Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA as advertisers. That's not because they've necessarily earned it somehow from us, but it's because it's too core to what we do. We review too many CPUs and GPUs. We view it as too critical to the industry as a whole, and so we don't allow them to advertise at this point. So that was already there. What's new, though, is we more explicitly detailed the categories that we've broadly banned, and then we published them. That way you all know what they are. So broad banning of categories means that any company operating within that category cannot purchase ads from us. If they buy them through YouTube AdSense, we don't really have any control over that. That's a different thing, the skippable ads and stuff like that. We're talking in-video advertisements that are rendered in. So the categories include CD key sellers, some of which have been busted for being money laundering fronts in the past. We want nothing to do with any of them. Likewise, gambling sites, that would include like CSGO skins, things of that nature. We've also banned organizations that are commonly predatory, like financial investment services for, say, artwork or whatever it may be. Cryptocurrency platforms and coins we've banned. Banking and insurance services, and also there's some medical services we've explicitly banned. Now, just because something isn't on this list doesn't mean it's explicitly allowed. Listing what we don't allow, it's infinitely long. We just listed things that are, one, already permitted on YouTube, at least in some capacity, so they have to clear that bar. And then two, are common amongst advertising online in general. So our stances on sponsored content, such as a bought and paid for by the company, say unboxing, where you are, as a reviewer or whatever, working with a product and the video is about that product and you're paid by the manufacturer of that product, those we don't allow, that kind of sponsored content. I think our opinions on that are extremely well known in the industry. If, however, you're newer here and you don't know them or you haven't paid attention or cared, that's on the site already. It's been there. So that's up there. Last is an update to our video sort of interface, we'll call it, where the things that pop out, like title information or lower thirds, stuff like that. We have some cool changes for this. We're adding an icon set that indicates whether GN independently acquired, so like purchased, whether it was sent the product by the manufacturer or whether it was loaned the product, like from a viewer. And instances where a manufacturer loans us a product, that will fall under the more severe of the two categories in terms of implications, which is sent by the manufacturer, not just loaned generically. So this icon set we're excited about because we want to make it immediately very clear for people. This is actually another inspiration from that Tom Scott video, although it wasn't his idea. He reported on it from someone else. We want to make it very clear immediately of where did the thing come from, so that viewers, especially who don't know us, can instantly make whatever judgment they want to make on how to take that information from the review. And if we ran certain types of tests, we want that to be immediately clear as well. So the other icon set we're adding, and this one will take another couple weeks to finalize because we're working on it still, but is icons indicating what kinds of tests we're running on the product. The reason for this is because our reviews are getting obviously very lengthy and detailed, and so we want to enable people even more than just the timestamps to instantaneously figure out pretty early in the video, does this even have the information I want about the product? So there'll be icons for thermal testing, for acoustic testing, for FPS testing, power testing, all that stuff. They're going to come up as sort of like badges as the video starts, and that is explicitly so if you don't see the thing you care about, and that is the only thing you care about, at least you know, like, okay, cool, won't waste my time, thanks GN for the help, and you go to the next video from us, hopefully, or someone else. Likewise, we are bringing back the experience bar. So we never talked about why we introduced this to begin with, and then I ended up just kind of temporarily removing it until we could get to a video like this to talk about it. The reason we brought in the experience bar is because we've started to get into more categories that we're new to. So power supplies, this was the one I was thinking about at the time we brought it in, and there's a power supply review we did out there somewhere where it's like it pops up and I think it says 2 years of experience or something. So the reason we introduced that is explicitly so that any viewers, especially who don't know our content that well, start watching a review, they see 2 years of experience, 1 year of experience or whatever with certain products, and they at least can take the information with that in mind. And we've got definitions for sort of how do we view 2 years? What does that really mean in terms of the expectation of knowledge and how likely we are to make a mistake and stuff like that. So that was why we introduced it. Now, when we introduced it, we were doing a bunch of GPU and CPU reviews and case reviews. So all the bars just said 8 years, 14 years, 11 years, whatever. And I think the people who saw the power supply one really liked it. And the people who only saw the ones that say like 14 years, I think thought we were just only trying to assert authority on it, but that wasn't actually the goal. And now that we're doing acoustic testing with a chamber, and it's much more detailed, we're bringing it back because what we actually want to do with the bar is establish a lack of authority when it exists. Now, we're not going to just like take it away when we have a lot of experience out of some sort of like humility. No, it's going to be there. But the thing that's important to me is as we get into the acoustic testing especially, we want to have that bar there. So we'll pop it out as probably a double bar now where it'll have the experience in reviewing the core product, so like a case, and then it'll have under it or above it the experience in doing the specific specialized type of test that may need to be disclosed separately. So for cases, it might pop out and say, I don't know how many years it's been we've done them, but let's say 11 years or something. And then under it, it says acoustic testing, noise testing. It might say 0 years, like 3 months, 6 months, something like that. That's the plan for the video interface changes. Now, some of these we've already implemented. Some we're rolling out over the next couple weeks. We're getting some graphics made and stuff like that. But I think that should be the about as much depth as you can want on our viewpoints, our beliefs, ethically, our stances on certain things in the industry. And just to reiterate this, these are what we believe are necessary for an outlet with our positioning and with our standards. And we don't suspect that everyone will take on all of these beliefs. Everybody has a little bit of a different way that they operate. But at a certain level, when you're doing certain types of reviewing, these ethics implications become much more important to consider strongly and have a very defined stance on it. And as we've come to appreciate that more and more, we wanted to take all of our sort of internal policies, put them on the internet, and that also forces us to write them down and formalize them. So it helps with maintaining a consistency. It helps with ensuring the team is familiar with all the processes. And most importantly, it helps make sure the viewers, if you have any questions about any of it, you just go to the gamers.nexus site, and it's like, there it is. At least you know, right? That's why it's there. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, as always. And we're back to some really heavy reviews content the next week or two. So super excited about that. But we wanted to just sort of publish all the improvements and also just the fixed policies we've already had, like the stance on contact versus not contact. It's not new. It's just that putting it on the internet clearly is the new part on the website. So, all right, thanks for watching. As always, you can subscribe for more. Check back. We've got the Ally review coming up, I think next or next. It's really cool though, and we'll